Hello and welcome back to the workout of the week. My name is Tommy Matthews and we've got Andy Phillips here. Today we're going to do a really special one for you. This is about improving your squat depth. It's something that everybody's really interested in, something that everyone's trying to achieve, a good range of motion in their squat patterns. So what we're going to look at today is a really simple yet effective method for improving your range of motion across the squat pattern. We're focusing really on the hip complex and the ankle complex here as two of the key complexes which are used in the squat, and also very important that we've got a good range of motion across those two key areas. So what we're going to look at first is go through this process. The first thing I want you to do when you're doing this is to make sure you test the exercise first to see if it actually has any effect. So we need to validate what we're doing. We need to be able to see whether it's actually making any difference. So the first thing we're going to look at is the squat. So Andy's going to just perform a couple of squats here. Now, Andy moves pretty well anyway, so in terms of who this works well for, it's for people who generally kind of just struggle to break parallel. People who kind of are fixed at that sort of 90-degree level and maybe struggling to get any lower than that. So if we're looking at Andy, obviously he is going to be breaking parallel here. He's got a nice decent neutral spine, which is the next thing we want to look at. We want to make sure that the client has got a nice neutral spine when they're squatting. For some people, they may struggle with thoracic movement, so Andy's just going to demonstrate some squats here with a poor thoracic position. So a lot of your clients, you may find that they have kind of this sort of curve in their thoracic. For those type of clients, this drill may not work so well. The main reasons for that is that we probably need to fix their thoracic issues first before we look at their hip complex. Okay, so just bear that in mind. Now you had a bit of an idea there of the kind of range of motion that Andy's going to. Next thing obviously is to kind of ask and to understand how they're feeling and what they felt. So, quickly you're going to ask the client to see what they felt. Did they feel any tightnesses and restrictions? And then when you come back to the exercise a bit later on and you can retest, you'll be asking them, does that feel any better in those areas? So you can simply get some simple answers as to whether it's worked or not. Okay, so we're going to go into the process now. The first thing we're going to look at is the lower leg. We're going to work on some self-myofascial release across the lower leg. So the first thing we're going to use is our ridge roller to release some tension across the posterior of the lower leg. So that's across the gastroc and soleus area. Okay, so Andy's just going to set himself up here. We're just going to go for one area here rather than rolling all the way up the muscle, purely for time, to be honest. But when you're doing this, I'd expect you to probably spend a bit of time going from the Achilles all the way up through the main muscle belly of the gastroc up towards just below the knee joint. Okay, and that's going to make sure that you've got a good release across the whole muscular tissue and also down towards the Achilles tendon. So when you are performing self-myofascial release, just make sure that you find some painful spots. You're working on that pain scale of 1 to 10. Up to a 7 really is about where you want to get to. If you're getting to a 7, hopefully you can hold it on that area, and as it releases, that pain will go down. As it gets down to about a 3 roughly, then you can kind of move on to the next area. So as you can see, Andy's just working his way around, finding those painful spots, and when he does, he's just going to hold on there until that pain releases down. It can take 10, 15, 20, sometimes 30 seconds for that to happen. You've got to make sure that you're breathing nicely just to relax and try and relax onto the roller. Okay, and obviously we'll swap over onto the other leg. To set up for the position with the lower leg posterior self-myofascial release, we want to make sure that we place our leg on the roller first, then we bring the other leg over the top just to apply a bit more weight onto the lower leg, and then if necessary we can bring our hip up off the floor as well. If you find that the pain is too great when you bring your hip up off the floor, obviously just drop the hip onto the floor, and that's going to reduce some of the weight on the roller and then take the pain scale down a little bit. Okay, so once we've performed that and spent maybe 2 or 3 minutes releasing the tension there, we're then going to work on the lateral hip. So we're going to do some SMR on the lateral hip. So Andy's just going to set himself up for this one. So essentially what you're targeting in this area around here, okay? There's a lot of tissue and a lot of fibers going through this area, especially things that attach to the sort of ITB area, okay? And then they're coming up through the lower back as well. So that kind of hip complex is affected if these areas are tight. So what we're looking at here is sticking the leg across the knee, and we're focusing on the left-hand side here. So the left-hand side is the area that we're going to be rolling out or trying to release. Okay, so once he's put his foot up across the knee, he's going to roll over onto the side to try and target that lateral hip. And again, he's going to try and find some painful areas or some areas of tension and just hold in those areas to try and release the tension. Okay, and again, once he's happy with that and once he's hopefully achieve some release, he's going to swap over and do exactly the same on the other side. As you'll notice here, just to set up position, he's just swapped the leg across and he's moving over onto his right hand side now to work on the lateral hip on his right hand side. Okay, so again, you do want to make sure you spend a bit of time in those areas to find those painful spots or those areas of tension to make sure that you can release those. Okay, great stuff. So next thing we're going to do is just a couple of static stretches to again aid this release and tension. The first one is just going to be working across some of the lateral hip areas. So first one's just going to be Andy demonstrating this himself. It's just a lateral hip stretch. Okay, head up, chest up, nice neutral spine if possible, pulling the knee towards the chest, and we're just focusing on the stretch across the lateral hip here. Again, with static stretches, similar sort of idea to any SMR, it's the releasing of tension in that area of fascia or muscular tissue. By doing this, we hope that we'll move more freely when we're actually performing the movement. In this situation, it's a squat. Okay, so we'd be holding this for a minimum, I would suggest, of 20 seconds. Potentially, you could be holding up to 60 seconds on each side. Okay, if you want to get really good results, you want to be holding these for a long period of time. We're going to do the same on the opposite side. Again, set up that nice position and pull the knee in towards the chest. You'll find that you'll use the opposite arm to the knee just to make sure you can pull the leg across the body. Okay, so once we've done this static stretch, we're going to come into some movement now. The first one we're going to look at is what we call squat prying. Okay, so we're going to use a kettlebell here as a bit of an anchor point here. That's going to allow Andy to use something to balance onto. So he's going to drop into a squat. And what he's going to do in this position, he's actually going to start just prying the movement, prying the joints. The key joints that he's focusing on are the ankles and the hips. So he can start rolling forwards and backwards on the ankles. Okay, and then side to side through the hips, forwards and backwards on the hips. And if necessary, you can start to turn the trunk as well to try and aid a little bit of rotation through the hip joints. And all this is doing is prying the joints to help range of motion and help force those joints into that deep range of motion. Okay, we're under support here, we're under control here, so I'm not too worried about causing any problems here. It's all in a controlled environment. You'll notice that Andy obviously has got a very good range of motion. You may find that a lot of clients struggle to get down here, which is why holding on to a kettlebell or perhaps holding on to someone's hands, so Andy's just going to give me his hands here, both hands if necessary. He can use those to move around and I can keep the support. Depending on what depth he's going at, I can hold on to him and support him all the way through this movement. Okay, so once we've finished there, next one Andy's going to come into is called some drop squats. Now, these drop squat movements are quite dynamic, so warming up is important. Obviously, we've done some hip prying there, so this is going to aid this movement. All he's going to do for this is going to grab hold of his lower leg. He's going to hold on to his lower leg and keep holding there. And what he's doing, he's going to take a deep breath in. As he's taking a deep breath in, he's then going to drop down dynamically into that squat position. He's then going to stand up. He's going to take a deep breath in, he's going to drop down, and if you can hold there at the bottom for me, Andy will show a few things. You'll notice the angle of the torso is nice and upright. You'll notice that he's pulling himself down into that squat. Essentially what he's doing is he's using his hands to anchor himself off and pull himself into that squat. Hope you come. You're probably going to do between 5 and 10 of these before you move on to the next drill. Okay, do a couple more. You'll notice that big breathing out on the way down. That's going to help release the tension in the torso so we can really drop into that deep position. Again, it is quite dynamic, so just ease into it to start off with. Okay, excellent. The next one we're going to work on is working with the power band. This is a really nice and interesting method of unblocking the hips. Okay. All we're going to work on here is first of all setting up the power band just across the top of the hip flexor, just below the ASI, so the anterior superior iliac spine. We're going to drop into almost like a lunge position here with the leg behind us, and all we're going to do is pry that hip forwards to start pulling the femur away from the hip joint. So you'll see how the pressure of the band is pulling this way, so we're pulling the femur away from the hip joint and hopefully opening up through the hip complex. Okay, so the power band's adding the tension, it's pulling us back, and Andy's just driving his hip forwards. And we can hold that for 10, 15 seconds. We can even do some pulsating movements where we're driving it forwards just to help increase the tension of the power band. And obviously we'd do that on both sides. Okay, so just quick swap over. Same thing, dropping down. So then we start to drive the hip forwards. We've got a variety of power bands, obviously, so you can increase or decrease the tension if necessary. Make sure when you are setting up your power band onto a frame or onto a racking system, make sure it's in a stable place and it's not going to move anywhere. Okay, so once we've done a few of those on each side, then we can move on to the final drill. The final drill I'm required for this one because this is going to be a partner-based drill. So as a trainer here, I'm going to start to work on what we call a hip flexor activation drill. I'm going to go through this very briefly for you guys now, just so you can see what we're doing. First of all we're doing is we're getting the feet up on the knee, above the knee. We're going to ask Andy just to pull his toes towards his knees. The focus here for the client, or for Andy here, is to pull his knees towards his chest. I'm going to let him get there, but I'm going to let him get there under tension. So I'm going to keep a bit of tension. I'm going to make him work to get there rather than just letting him get there himself. Okay, so Andy's going to now perform that. So he's going to focus on pulling his knees towards his chest. You'll notice as he's pulling his knees towards the chest, so I can maintain balance. I'm sitting back in my hips. Okay, I'm letting my arms go straight and I'm keeping that balance all the way. If I just stayed upright, because of Andy's power, he'd probably just pull me over. Okay, so the key thing here is to make sure that we're in a strong balanced position so we can allow Andy to work. Okay, we're going to hold that tension for about 10 seconds, maybe even up to 20, depending on how strong they are. And from there, we're going to let them release. We're going to pull them all the way out. And we're going to let them relax for a second. We're going to go again. We generally do this 3 or 4 times to get a really good effect. Okay, so dorsiflexion of the ankles, pulling the toes towards the knees, then pull the knees towards the chest and allow him to get there. Okay. Now Andy, again, as we said, he's got pretty good range of motion, so you're going to find that he gets quite a good hip flexion here. A lot of your clients may struggle to get this far. What you're looking for is to get them to that end of range where you feel like the tension isn't quite there anymore, and you're going to make them really work at that end of range. Okay? So get to that end of range where you feel like the tension is just starting to ease off a little bit. They've not maybe got the strength there. That's where you want to make them work. And then release Andy. Okay, we'll do one more, nice and slowly in, and get those hip flexors working all the way through. Off we go. Good, all the way in, all the way in, all the way in. Excellent, hold there. Okay, so this is the final drill you're going to do before we go back to the retesting. This is a great drill for activating the hip flexors. By activating the hip flexors, we help ourselves pull into those deep squat positions. We also activate the tibialis anterior across the ankle complex, which helps us release tension through the gastroc, through the soleus. Okay, it's a really important drill that we can do prior to squatting. Okay, so Andy's done all the drills now. He's going to come back to the standing position. We're just going to have a little bit of a retest. And again, Andy's range of motion will probably improve a little bit here. He came into this drill, into this sequence nice and cold, so hopefully he'll be fairly dramatic changes, and hopefully you'll see from the side angle there that there's a good increase of range of motion across the hip joint while still maintaining a really nice neutral lumbar spine. And obviously, Andy, how does that feel?
Feels very good.
Feels very good. There you go. So we've hopefully made some differences there and we've improved the range of motion. So follow that sequence with your clients. It's a really, really effective way. It does take some time, but it's a really effective way of improving hip mobility to improve your squat range of motion. Okay, so I hope you enjoy that. If you've got any questions, make sure you post them on social media and ask us, and obviously let us know how you've got on, and if you're seeing results out of your clients with that, we'd really like to know. And we look forward to seeing you next time on the workout of the week. Thank you.